This is an after-school program podcast.
Welcome to the Home Studio Hangout podcast, where we explore what it's like building, running, and working out of a home studio with your hosts, Joshua Matotek, Andrew Simmons, and many guests in different areas of the music industry.
Hello there, and welcome to the very first episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. My name is Andrew Simmons. You can also call me Drew. I am a producer and mix engineer from Greenville, South Carolina. My co-host Josh, that'll be joining me in a little bit. He is a producer and songwriter from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We are very stoked to be doing this. This is something that he and I have been talking about for a good long while. I think we've been prepping for it about 8 months, kind of getting everything together, making sure we have a few backlogs of episodes, being able to release a bunch at one time up front, and having a few more to kind of trickle out as we get used to everything, getting all of our tech right. But it is here. We are excited to present this to you guys. So just a note, some of these, like I said, were recorded in earlier 2020. Josh was in Florida at the time and has since moved back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So the timeline on some of these are a little jumbled, and the order on some of these are a little messed up, but they should be in roughly the correct order that we recorded them in. But shouldn't really matter. The content and the conversations that he and I have and that he and I have with other people are still extremely relevant, extremely good information. We had a great time recording all of these. And today's episode, very first episode, is on a favorite topic of he and I, which is microphones. But also not just microphones, but how to have a very forward-thinking mentality when making larger purchases. We kind of go into that there on the end. But we're so excited to present this to you. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoy the episode. And welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout with your boys, Josh. I am not Josh, but we're here with Josh.
That was so loud.
And
like in my stupid head, though, it was funny because it's like, oh, I'm basically just a giant can of sparkling water.
You are.
And then I opened it and I just clipped like a positive 50,000 decibels.
You're the living embodiment of LaCroix.
Okay, this is aha. Okay, thank you.
Oh,
yeah.
You're the living embodiment of off-brand LaCroix.
Hey, you know it, dude. It's me, your boy.
You know.
What's up?
It's your boy, Josh.
It's your boy, aha.
And myself, Drew. I am stoked to be here. I have had a long day. I am ready to chat. Me and Josh were actually having a good conversation while I was driving home today about his recent delve into the world of microphones. As you've seen on the name of this episode, today we are talking about microphones.
And also, on a little bit more of like a broader topic, we're talking about when you should buy nice things and when it's a waste of money.
Yeah, strategic is, I think, a thing we're going to talk about more so than anything is like strategically purchasing microphones.
Right.
That's probably like the biggest approach we're going to take today. But first, let's start with, for those of you who are new to the recording world, we have, and you're like, oh, A microphone. It's that thing that I plug into an interface so I can be heard. Yes, you're correct. It's the thing that we are both talking into right now, though we are actually both talking into two different kinds of microphones because Josh is using his Slate mic, which is a large diaphragm condenser microphone, which is one of the 4 types. I am talking into my Shure SM7B, which is a dynamic microphone. We also have another 2 types of microphones. We have a small diaphragm condenser microphone, which is, like you would think, similar to the one Josh is using, except the diaphragm in which it picks up sound.
Mine are in my car, or else
is
I'd
much smaller.
flash them on screen.
A lot of people like to call them pencil condensers because they look like little like sticks, like
I
pencils.
have I'm holding a little flashlight right now, and just picture this flashlight if it was.
Yeah, dude, that's actually really good. Yeah,
That's what it looks like.
KM84s look like flashlights to me.
137.
And then there are also the 4th type, which are like a really fun type of character microphone, ribbon microphones. Which I don't know, we might talk about today. We might delve into the world of some ribbon microphones. But yeah, I think mainly where we're going to live is the large diaphragm condenser microphone. But you might ask, well, why are there so many different types of microphones? Well, dynamic, generally speaking, is used for things like basically if you've ever played live, all of those microphones you used are dynamic microphones, probably. Like mics that you would use to mic your amp, the good old Shure SM58 and 57. Like, they are workhorse microphones. Dynamic microphones are made to take really high SPL, which stands for sound pressure level. So like you can put it right up to a guitar amp that's cranked all the way past 11, and it'll blow into that mic and it will not break. You can put it on a snare, and that guy is just whacking away on the snare, and it's not going to bust the mic. And it won't distort as easily either, because they have a very, I guess, low natural gain is, I guess, with the way you would approach it. So yeah, those are those kind of microphones. Microphones you would use on a really loud source. And you might say, Andrew, you're using a dynamic microphone on your voice right now. Why? Well, one, it was cheaper than a lot of other things. Two, whenever I'm recording rappers and people who scream a lot, like metal vocalists and indie vocalists that might want to have like a really dark tone, I use this SM7B that you see in front of my face right here. And then Josh, on the other hand, is using a condenser microphone.
Yeah.
Condensers.
Condenser.
Which, in a short term, a condenser where a dynamic gives you like, a really small frame of reference, but can take a lot of high SPL. Like I said, a condenser is made to capture detail. When you think of condenser, think of detail.
Yeah.
So a lot of vocal mics, mics that you would use to capture room sounds, pianos, overheads, mics on drums, things like that.
Yeah.
And we won't really, small diaphragm condensers essentially do the exact same thing, except with a different style of diaphragm. And a ribbon microphone, fun fact, uses a literal ribbon in the microphone. They're actually really tall. And they do not take very high SPL at all because they will break. But we're not going to talk about them very much. We might actually do a whole different episode on just ribbon microphones. Today, we're going to focus in on just really just large diaphragm condenser microphones. We'll talk a little bit about the SM7B as an option, as a dynamic microphone for your voice. But really, we're talking about microphones used for your voice. So, Josh, hit us with your dilemma.
All right, so I bought this slate mic a few months ago because I was using an SM7B. I was doing a lot of top lines, and I was like, you know what? I want something that makes me sound pretty. So I bought this. It was on sale for $500. All the models are pretty sick on it, you know? Like, in a mix, everything sounds fairly authentic. It gets a little sibilant, but
for new people, top lines being what?
What?
I said for new people, top lines being defined as
the lyrics and melody.
Yeah.
Of a
Some
song.
people don't know what that is, though.
Yeah. So yeah, I bought this. I like it. The only issue is that it does sound a little cheap on the top end. Cheap being like a very brittle high end. Which I'm cool with. Like, I mean, I feel like our generation, we kind of grew up using bad gear.
Yeah,
you know,
true.
it's like a lot of like the people that came before us, like how they got their start is that they interned at these massive studios. So they were running, you know, $15,000 vocal rigs, and like that's what they were working off of. For us, you know, I used a really crappy Bluebird mic, and then I got the SM7B, then I got a Vanguard, which the Vanguard was actually pretty nice, but it was like, it sounded okay on me, but it sounded bad on everybody I worked with. So I sold it. Got this mic, and so far this mic sounds pretty much good for just about everybody. But the one thing that I'm really missing is like that smooth top end. It does pop really, really well, but I don't always work with pop music. And I like a lot of like mid-forward vocals. So what I'm running into, you know, I was listening to a podcast by Matt Rad, and he was talking to Matt Beckley, who's a vocal producer. And they kind of said like the best thing to do is to like get the mic that you want and learn it really, really well. And I found it interesting to hear that Matt Rad, you know, he's worked with One Direction, 30 Seconds to Mars, I want to say like the Wombats, like all these huge artists. And his main mic has always been this U87 that he has, which I thought was...
A lot of those artists are really pop-leaning pop rock.
Right, like you would think that most of them were tracking on like references or C800s or 251s, you know, but he just uses a U87, which I thought was interesting. And the reason why is because it takes EQ really, really well, and because he knows how it sounds. And I thought that was interesting because he kind of came up under like the rock kind of sound. Like he came up under, I believe it was Eric Valentine. So it kind of made sense. Like that microphone was used on every single record that he grew up listening to, and same for me, you know. And so I kind of just figured it out where it's like, well, if I'm always looking for more mids in all of these songs that I'm doing, then there's a good chance that I shouldn't be, you know, using a microphone that seems to be doing pretty good for pop music right now. So I decided I'm going to get a U87. And the reason behind that is because of, well, everything I just said, but also because, you know, I think I'm finally at that point where it's like, I just need to get one of the flagship mics, learn how to use it really well. And then whenever I need that super clean, pristine pop mic, like a 251 or a Manley reference, it's like, I'll have the money to just buy whatever I want at that point.
For sure. Know? So let's break this down before we kind of go through the process of how we, because me and you have been talking about this for the last like week or so.
Something like that.
Something like that, on and off for the last week. So let's break down this first section of talking about this. So if you're new and you're hearing us shout a bunch of numbers like an 87 or a Ref C, numbers and letters, you have no idea what we're talking about. We are going to have show notes for this episode on the website where we are going to have...
Hi, Jacob.
where we're going to have all of the mics that we talk about linked in the show notes, so that if you're new and you want to know what we're talking about when we say a Ref C, we're talking about a Manley Reference C microphone. It's a very awesome microphone, very widely used in pop music. You'll know what that looks like. You can see, maybe you've seen one before. Maybe you were touring a studio and you saw one, or you were watching a studio tracking video and you saw somebody use one, right? Or a Sony, what are the freaking, whatever it is?
C800.
Yeah, the Sony C800. Maybe you're a big fan of Periphery and you saw that Spencer, for the last 2 records, has been tracking, fun fact, Spencer for the last 2 Periphery records has been tracking his vocals on a Sony C800.
Really?
Through his own vocal chain. Dude, it sounds so good too.
I didn't know that he was on that. It would make sense though.
It does make sense. He used to use he used to use a Manley Reference C, but I think he switched over to the C800.
Yeah.
Anyway, both of those microphones are very expensive, and a lot of you probably aren't at the level that we're talking about yet, but we're going to talk about why Josh is making the decision that he's making right now. So, breaking this down, Josh does a lot of different kinds of music, and he's specializing in vocals, so that's one reason. He really needs to have the ability to track the best he can on his vocals to really sell the artist or the producer or whoever he's working with on the top line or the melody and lyrics that he wrote for that song that he is pitching to them.
Yep. And to be honest with you, I would probably, if it wasn't for the fact that I'm also getting into like live vocal production, I wouldn't be considering this at all, because the slate mic does enough. Because at the end of the day, if I'm just sending a reference to somebody, then no one's going to hear my vocal take besides the band.
Exactly.
And this mic does that extremely well.
But Josh is leaning into the area of being a vocal producer heavily.
Yeah.
Being the guy that comes in and sits down with the vocalist and they work through all the lyrics, they work through all the lines, like melody lines and counter melody and lyrical lines, and he sits down and he tracks all of it and stacks all of the layers with the vocalist or whoever needs to be doing those layers. But Josh is the guy that sits down and makes all of that happen and makes all of that sound the best as possible. So if he's going to be that guy, he really needs to have a couple different things, really, when you think about it. He needs to have a good do-it-all mic. He needs to have one really good flexible mic, and or like, not necessarily like a do-it-all, but a mic that is really good in a lot of different scenarios, that is of a very high quality. But still doesn't quite do everything, does what he needs. And then the last thing that he would probably need, and he's not even at this point yet, probably, but like the mic that is his sauce, that he feels that he loves the most, or, something that he needs for a specific character.
Yeah. See how I kind of look at it? It's like a spectrum. So, I'd like to look at it as really, you have like the dark, indie folk mics, like a U47. For those who don't know, like if you want to know what one of those sounds like, just think of Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
If you want to touch any other mic. It's very big, it's very round, it's very soft.
Good for deep voices.
Great for deep voices. I think it's also pretty good for high voices, because it kind of gives that body and that softness to the top end is really interesting. So that's like on the dark side of things. Then you have your middle ground, which is where I would toss like a U87. A lot of the, maybe not legendary microphones that you see on the market are probably going to fall in that middle ground, where they aren't super, super bright, but then they also aren't super, super dark. So that's where you'll see like your Chandler mics, your Mojave mics, your I don't even know what else. And then we're just going to move into the top end, which is going to be like the ideal pop vocal mic, which is going to be your Manley Reference, your
Sony
Telefunken 251, Sony C800. Now, all these mics that we're mentioning are expensive. Chances are, if you don't know what they are, you probably aren't ready for one yet. I mean, the mics that I'm looking at start at $3,000, and I think the most expensive one that we mentioned so far is around $20,000. Since they stopped making the C800G.
I think it's the Sony is the most expensive one that is on that list.
Yeah, and so
I don't know how much this Chandler is.
Chandler, they're actually pretty cheap. The TG, which is actually something I'm still considering. I just haven't got to mess with one in person yet. It's only $1,850. The red is just under $5,000.
Yeah. So
So it's a lot.
But we're talking above like a $4,000 minimum, really.
Basically, besides the Manley and the U87. But
and that really depends on if you go AI or if you go vintage.
Yeah, if you go vintage. So to kind of put things into perspective here, the whole outlook that we're coming from is that, one, you do not need expensive gear to get great results. I just admitted that. Expensive gear simply makes your life easier. And if you're going to be sending out tracks to mix engineers, you have to make sure that what you're giving them is the best that you can possibly give. Two, you don't need expensive gear. However, I feel like once you hit a certain threshold in price, you should probably be tracking on something better than a $500 mic.
Yep.
Unless if you're doing metal where everybody just uses an SM7, which I think is a huge mistake. And I don't know the only reason why that mic's popular is because it's cheap.
It's cheap and it takes really high SPL, and you don't have to worry about potentially breaking it.
Yeah. I mean, you know what's crazy though? I was doing a good old scrum into this mic and it sounded saucy.
Oh, dude, yeah. I think, and I've used 87s and that Mojave 200 to track screams before. That Mojave takes screams really well.
It's a very smooth mic.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
For screams, it kind of has a similar characteristic to the 7B in that way.
Yeah. Back on topic here. Yeah. So we have your low range microphones. SM7B is probably the best thing you could buy for under $500, unless if the Slate mic goes on sale. Yeah. Other than that, I know that it's the Aston, is it Spirit or Origin?
I think it's
whichever
Spirit.
The more expensive one is. That one actually sounds pretty cool. I would still just get an SM7. The issue with those mics is you need a cloud lifter to use them, and they require a ton of EQ to sit right. But that's okay because it's cheap and it still sounds good and it's not overly sibilant.
And you can compress it to death.
You kind of have to compress it to death.
Yeah, but that's what I was gonna say. But it depends. And really, it's like in your genre of music. So generally used in metal or aggressive indie rock, or it's very popular in the rap game.
Yeah, because of the low end.
Yeah, because of the low end and for like the body of the vocal, and they like compressing their vocal. They like their vocal to be in your face, very spitty.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I know that Dua Lipa tracked like a few songs on her latest record on an SM7, sitting on Ian Kirkpatrick's couch, which is
literally
pretty cool.
All of Billie Eilish's stuff was a 7B.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
It was a Tlm-103.
No, not for the record, for the EP or for the mixtape.
Oh, well, I'm not that big of a fan. I just
for the one that she.
Where I Go. Oh, well, it's the Casey record, but worded differently. It's like Where We Go, where do I go when I'm snoozing?
No. That's the record. That's the one that she tracked.
That's the one with the Tlm-103.
Yeah.
Anyway,
don't smile at me.
So
is the one.
You have your low end microphones that can still sound pretty good.
Yeah.
Then you have your mid range, which is going to start right around $1,000. And
Yeah,
that'll go up to,
I'd say you could dip down into like 700 for some of the mid-range stuff. I mean,
yeah.
TLMs are pretty mid-range.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely are.
They're
And
pretty
so there's a lot of great options in that range too. You have the Mojave mics, you have the low-end Neumanns.
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
is
between those two,
basically
you should be good. To be
7
honest
to
with you, I think if you
7 to
learn how to
2,000.
use a low-end microphone really well, there's no need for a mid-range mic in that
Mhm.
price range, because a lot of those mics aren't going to be too much better. For instance, a Warm Audio U87 clone just beat out a MA200 on a song I did.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because the 200 is literally $1,200 and the Warm Audio mic was $600, and that's not even the new redesign that just dropped last week.
Yeah,
That was
with the
the
better
old
but the better internal stuff.
So, yeah, and you're gonna gain a lot by learning how to make cheap mics sound really good.
For sure.
You'll gain a lot, and
Well,
then
and
once you move up to
you'll-
something nicer, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is so easy.
Yeah, well, you're going to learn what not to do and what to do, and then you'll respect what a good mic sounds like even more.
Right. And then you have like the high-end mics, like 3,000 plus. And what you have to watch out for is that there's actually a lot of clones, meaning that it's these other companies that basically just copy these classic designs. And like, if you listen to like the Bach Audio ones, like no offense to them, but I think that they sound horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
And they aren't cheap either. You know,
Yeah.
it's like a real U47 is what, $9,500 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the clone that they're selling is $5,000. So you're only saving $4,000. And
Yeah,
it sounds
I mean,
horrendous.
and
It sounds
really,
nothing like the real thing.
I was going to say, and really, once you get up to that amount of money, what's saving up just for a little while longer to get the real thing? And we're going to get to that a little bit later.
Or get a microphone that's doing its own thing in that
Exactly.
price range really well. Like the Chandler Red. Same
Exactly.
price. Sounds phenomenal. One of the best mics I've ever heard.
Very unique sound. Could be
You
a
know?
part of your arsenal that makes you kind of sets you apart with your vocal sound.
Right. And yeah, so it's like that's the one thing I was running into. It's like you get really confused when you start looking at mics. So it's easy to just pick something and stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, a lot of the clones really aren't worth it. I would say besides the Golden Age stuff. Those are the only mics I heard that seem to really make me think these guys know what they're doing. And they're a lot cheaper than the bot clones. They're $1,800 for a 251 or a U47 clone. And that is a huge price difference, and they sound incredible. You know, another thing to consider as well is that whenever you're buying a mic, you shouldn't be buying it for the brand name. And like, in a way you should, because you want nice things, right?
Yeah.
But you should never buy a microphone because you think that artists care. Artists don't care what they're singing into. The mic I'm speaking into right now is the same mic that Oak Felder tracks Sorry Not Sorry on. And that was a hit. That was a full-on hit. And it was tracked on an $800 microphone because the Blackbird 251 model sounded really good on Demi's voice, which is why I'm always going to keep this mic around. You know, but then on the other hand of things, most people won't touch anything in the top 40 world unless if it has one of those familiar names because they're tried and true.
Yeah.
But no, you know, for the most part, artists on our level, they aren't going to walk in and be like, it's not a Neumann. I can't use that.
If they do, you don't want to work with them.
Yeah, and if they do, you don't accept them as a client because the truth is that if you learn one thing really, really well, it'll do more for you than a $10,000 mic.
Yep.
So
here's what I'd like to do.
That's kind of where I'm at right now. It's like, make sure you're buying an expensive piece of gear to make your life easier and to give your artists a better product.
And
you never buy something because you think it will give you clients, which if you go on the forums like Gear Sluts, like it's absurd. Like I was trying to find I was trying to find comparisons between the U87 and then the TLM-67 because they're very similar. You know, it's like the TLM, it's a 67, but it's FET. So it's like, well, that means it's pretty close to an 87. Turns out it's not that close.
It doesn't
but
sound that close.
Like in the comments, there were guys saying, oh yeah, well, no, I mean, no one's going to come work with you because you have a TLM-67. It's not a real 67, and it's also not an 87. You know, I mean, you want to have that 87 up on your website so artists will see that and come work with you. And it's like, we both charge more than those guys do.
Guaranteed.
Neither of us have a Neumann mic.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point of, obviously gear will not make you successful and gear will not bring you clients. But another thing that you said that I want to reiterate is the fact of if you buy expensive gear. So caveat, if you buy expensive gear, if you find yourself in a place where you're like, I am ready to drop $3,000, $4,000 on a microphone, right? That is a big caveat for a lot of people. Rightfully so. That's a lot of money. But if you're finding yourself like in a specific situation like Josh, where he is specifically working on vocals, they need to sound really good and they need to fit a lot of different genres, but they also need to compete with the charted like top 50, top 200 Billboard like radio stuff. There's a level of quality expected there. All right. So you're getting into that situation. Do your research and make sure that the mic is going to work for you. Don't just buy a mic because it's a very
what your
expensive
favorite producer uses.
Yeah, don't buy a mic just because it's a fancy mic that's expensive with a good name and you've seen a bunch of producers that work on your favorite records use it.
Yeah.
So Josh went down a rabbit hole.
You have to figure out what kind of sounds are harder for you to get.
Yeah.
For me, it's harder for me to get smooth mid-forward vocals because, you know, I'm doing indie rock. I'm doing like the whole Oliver Tree vibe where it's a combination of everything. I'm writing a grunge record right now. And then on top of that, I'm doing like emo pop music. So it's like most of what I do is not a super scooped pop sound, which honestly my Slate mic does very well. Who knows? I might get this mic and still be tracking this at the same time for whenever I do want to go for a scoop pop sound. I have it right out of the box with this microphone. I mean, I just did it today. It was like, oh, well, the chorus needs to kind of sit on top of I'm almost clipping. Sorry, guys. Getting too close. So it happened today. I was like, oh, yeah, in the chorus, because I was using the 49 model because it has a bit of a bump in the mid-range, and I like it. Yeah. And then in the chorus, I was like, this needs to sit on top of everything. And I simply just flipped on the C800 model, and it fit instantly. So I might still use an $800 microphone over a $3,200 mic. I very well might do that.
Because it fits.
At certain times. But I know for the most part, 90% of the time that I boot up my DAW, I'm going for this specific sound. And this is the one mic that I kept going back to through my research. If I want that super polished pop vocal sound, then I have the mic. And if I'm making enough money off of it, then I'll go buy a reference C.
Exactly.
You know?
And
but I don't need that right now.
That's the other thing is, so tell people about the mic shootout thing, because I thought that was super cool. I didn't know that Sweetwater did that.
So if you go on Sweetwater's site, they have a 50 mic shootout. They don't do as many mics as I wish that they did. And it's really interesting because for those of you who are looking for microphones, most of the time that you see comparisons, they will run the mics completely dry with no compression, no EQ. And I think that that's bad because if you're in any sort of modern genre, I mean, there's times where there could be 30 dBs of gain reduction on the vocal by the time it's mastered, you know, if not more if you're doing metal.
Yep.
So it's like, why would you compare two microphones completely dry? It makes no sense because where you start hearing problem areas in a microphone is the more that it gets compressed. So they let you download like 100 and 4 tracks because they have a male vocal and then they have a female vocal, and then they give you stereo tracks to play along with them. And I went through and I overcompressed every single microphone. Well, first I listened dry and picked out the ones I didn't like. And then, man, I'm burping over here. So much carbonation. All right. So I just clipped the mic again. Nice. It's so loud. And so I went through and I overcompressed everything to hear all the problem areas. And a lot of microphones that I was recommended to check out, I ended up hating. A lot of microphones I thought I hated and I didn't want, I ended up liking a lot. And a lot of the microphones that you see on Top 40's releases still sounded fantastic.
There's a reason
and
that
so
they're there.
I recommend everybody downloads that and gives it a shot because it helped me out a lot. It confirmed for me that the U87 is still the sound that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. It also confirmed for me that I do not want a Bach clone at all.
Yeah.
It also confirmed for me that the Mojave mics are very nice, but out of the box, they just don't sound how I want them to. Mm-hmm. And it also confirmed for me that I don't want an even more expensive microphone. I tried the U47 FET. I didn't like it. I don't like how the top end sits. I like mics to be darker, but still have the little top end bump, if that makes sense. I want it to sound like a modern microphone, but also be mid forward. U47 FET didn't work out. There was one more mic that I was checking into as well that didn't work out. I can confirm though that the Telefunken mics that are technically clones of the vintage ones, those still sound almost identical to the ones that were made, almost we're approaching 100 years at this point, which is crazy. They still sound identical, which is why they're 10 grand. And I could confirm that the Reference C is the most crystal clear microphone that I think I've ever heard.
And dude, there's a reason that
the U87 is my mic. Like that's the sound that I want.
There's a reason that a lot of R&B singers use the Reference C, because it's that crystal clear soaring sound. Yeah,
and a lot of like radio rock guys do too. Yeah, because they want that vocal to sit on top.
Exactly,
which is cool. Like I feel like in rock, it's either the U87, sometimes the U67, and then the Reference C. Which is funny because the Reference C is the cheapest out of all those, especially if you're looking at vintage mics.
Yeah.
But so that really goes to show that Manley knows how to make a fantastic microphone.
Dude, I love Manley stuff just in general. But what I was gonna say was, go to the website. We'll have it linked if you don't want to Google search and try to find it. We will link to it in the show notes of this episode. But take it, download it, mess with it, especially if you're new. It is essentially a requirement if you are new to audio to do this, so that you can go look up what the microphone looks like and then listen to it, so that you know kind of what it sounds like on a vocal, kind of what it sounds like on a male vocal and a female vocal, right? Josh wasn't looking for a female vocal microphone, but you might be a tracking engineer and you might need to prep yourself for both options, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it's also interesting because you're able to see that price has no correlation at all to the final outcome. Mm-hmm. I 100% mean that, because I'll tell you what, out of all of the microphones under like the $2,500 mic, my Slate mic sounds better than I'd say almost all of them.
And this comes to another conversation of that Slate mic, the ML1 Slate mic. For the price of, I think it's still $1,000 new.
It's $800 without the preamp, and it's $1,000 with the preamp.
Okay, so let's look on. I'm gonna ML1 microphone on Reverb. I'm pulling it up right now.
No, don't do that, because if you buy it used, then I don't believe that they might be able to transfer the software to you.
They do.
But if whoever you're buying off of doesn't do that, then you have to pay $300 for the pack for the microphones.
You have to check, obviously. So like if you just want the microphone and you just want a really clear microphone, you can get it for $698. Like that's dirt cheap.
Yeah.
But I would once again, I agree with Josh. Like this is a situation where I would just either wait for a sale to buy it new or just buy it new outright. You don't need their preamp. Josh doesn't use their preamp. I know a lot of people that just, especially if you have universal audio interfaces, just use the mic into the interface and it works fine.
So here's a pro tip. I kind of went down the rabbit hole of how does gain staging affect this microphone, and I noticed if I run the mic hot, like on loud parts I'm running into the yellow, then the emulation gets very cloudy and it could sound almost grainy. But if I run the mic pretty quiet, it has such a low noise floor that I don't mind running it quiet at all.
Yeah.
Then the emulation comes out crystal clear and you could hear a bigger difference between each microphone. And also, I mean, typical condenser mic etiquette is stay way farther away than how I'm talking into it right now for this podcast.
For sure.
So,
but for the money at the $800 price mark, I do not think there is a mic under $3,000 that could beat it.
Yeah, there is.
For the flexibility of it. I think
it's the $1,500 Sphere by Townsend.
Okay.
Which is UAD specific, so you can only use that modeling microphone if you're on UAD.
Yeah,
but
that's
apparently
UAD specific.
Those emulations even sound better than this. To me, I think 1,500 is a bit much for a modeling mic.
It is. That's the other issue.
Like, to me, like a modeling mic is a utility. It's to use, you toss this next to your main microphone, so if you need a different sound somewhere, this is what saves you.
So
it's your backup.
That's the thing. For the price, that's what I'm saying. For the price, this microphone cannot be beaten for under that amount of money is what I'm saying. Because it doesn't make sense to buy a modeling microphone over $1,000 in my opinion.
I don't think that it would be worth it. To be 100% honest with you, if I paid full price for this, it would even be kind of pushing it for me. However, I do have to say it does pop vocals flawlessly.
Exactly, dude. Well, and it can do a bunch of different style of things. One thing we were talking about, it's great for background vocals. Because what you can do is you can, especially if this is the only mic that you have, right? And you get that main vocal sounding amazing. And you have all these background vocals like harmonies or just layers or doubles or something. And you want them to sound just like a little bit different to thicken it up. Instead of going and EQing and compressing a bunch, go through all of your mic locker, the digital mic locker on your Slate bundle. Some of those will actually do something better than you could do EQing and compressing, and it'll get you there faster and it'll sound more full.
Yeah, and so whenever you're switching through, on top of that, things like backing up from the mic and changing your character, so you're singing in a different voice, that will give your background vocals a ton of depth, and that's something that took me almost a decade to learn.
I'm just thinking of stuff that's already tracked. If you're in like if you're like in a mixing scenario.
Well, I just used this whole mic for a song a couple of days ago, and I was mixing it today, and so the intro is is a Telefunken 251. The pre-chorus goes into a Neumann 49. Is it M49, right? I don't know my vintage microphones too well. But yeah, it goes into a 49. And then in the chorus, I have it on a C800, which on its own is too bright for me. But in this song, on this voice, it's...
Yeah. So that's the other thing. You can, and what we're talking about here is software. This is a mic that runs into your interface dry, and that you use software to model different microphones digitally within your computer. So what Josh is able to do is take one vocal take and decide, the intro needs to sound a little bit darker. so I'm going to use a different model on it. And then the pre-chorus needs to sound a little bit more thick in the mid-range maybe, or a little brighter. Use a different model for that. And the chorus, obviously, because of the mic choice that he used, he needed it to sound very pop vocal, very bright, very breathy, very airy. So he picked a different microphone that sounded a little more that. But he was able to, within the computer, without having to set up a bunch of different mics or make sure all are all in whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, taking the extra time and having, I mean, the collection of microphones you just named would have cost you $30,000 to $50,000 to own.
I mean, at a minimum.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. At a minimum.
Like a vintage 251, if it's working, is a good, 20 grand. And then you have a C800G, which is now 20 grand. And then you have then you got the 49 is probably at least 10 or 15, right?
I think it's like 10. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, you're looking at like 50 grand. So
that's a house.
Yeah. So,
that's a little house.
but Josh was able to do it with an $800 microphone, and it gave his song a little more character, a little more movement, different feel.
Keep in mind, it's not about copying the microphone to a T. It's about having different options for different voices. Yep. And so far it saved me a couple times. It's great to have. Even when I get the U87, another reason why I'm getting a FET mic is so I could travel with it without having to worry about a tube power supply to go along with it, which is always cool.
For sure.
And I'll still probably take along the Slate mic just in case, I mean, it's like a bottle of water. I could put it in my backpack where the water bottle goes.
So I think on the end here, I just want to toss out some recommendations for people. So let's do like recommendations for beginners. We're all going to just talk microphone wise. Recommendations for beginners. Recommendations for, I don't know, let's do like amateur, like people that are like coming into the
like where they're starting to be like, hey, maybe I need something a bit nicer.
Or they're starting to make money. Like it's like their part-time job or their like side hustle, right? So they're in that mood where it's like, I'm charging for this, I'm making some money, but it's not my full-time job.
Yeah.
And then the people that will go like, I would say intermediate, because most experts like can do their own whatever, like they know kind of what they need. But I would say let's go intermediate, where it's that level of like people that are kind of where we are.
Yeah.
People that kind of where we are, where it's like, I am looking into a more expensive mic, but I need to be really particular about what I get.
Yeah.
I don't have a bunch of money to drop $3,000.
I already know mine right off the bat.
So go your beginner mic.
All right, my beginner mic is an SM7B.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, so I have two beginner mics. Because I want to go like first mic, and then I want to go like just one step up. I will definitely recommend, you can't beat it for the price, the Audio-Technica AT2020. They're a little sibilant sometimes, but they're also very good on a bunch of different sources. If you're going for vocals, they're pretty solid. They're also only $100.
See,
that's the other issue. They're very cheap, so it's kind of hard to beat that. It's the best mic in that range. If you're looking for like, if you're still like $300-400 is too much, to me that's like gonna be the mic that you're gonna go for on that sub $100 level. Secondly, I agree with Josh. SM7B, get a cloud lifter, because it was the thing that changed the game for me with using this mic. I kind of hated it up front, and then having a cloud lifter made it so much more usable to me.
I'm selling mine.
Dude, Josh is selling his.
I'm selling mine.
It eliminated the noise floor for me. Like I have zero noise now. It's amazing for what it is. I do not use it on everything, and actually I mainly have it for screaming and rap vocals.
I used mine on a kick drum, and it was the only time I was happy with the mic.
I used it on a snare, and I loved it on a snare.
You know what? Sam mics up his Bassman with an SM7. Sounds insane, dude.
On bass guitars, that sounds great.
It's really good for instruments. I don't like it on vocals because it's just there's not enough detail. But so
yeah, that's your good. There's two options there. If you're like super and you're like, I don't want to drop a ton of money, like I'm looking for less than $100. AT 2020, my opinion.
I'd say an AT 4040. Aren't they only like $250? Let me look. AT 4040, it's $300.
$300. At that point, you might as well just get a 7B.
So,
in my opinion. Yeah, you might as well get a 7B if you're gonna go that close. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean you could get a used SM7B for the same price.
Yeah,
but
plus
then
a
you
cloud
still need
lifter.
a cloud lifter. So technically, the SM7B is like a $500 microphone.
Yeah,
I mean
basically.
that's kind of what it is.
To
me, it's like
$400.
I mean, get whatever you can afford.
Mm-hmm.
But like you should ultimately try to at least get an SM7 to learn on because
exactly. Well, you need to know.
It works on just about everybody, and you can EQ it, and it'll teach you a lot about how to EQ things and how vocals sit in a mix
and how to compress because you
and
have to compress these well. You have to learn to compress these well in order for them to sound good. The other issue is if you are a mix engineer, I highly recommend you getting a 7B. Like highly. Even if you never track vocals and you're a mix engineer, get an SM7B
because everybody's going to be sending you vocal tracks.
That is every vocal that if you're charging, like there's a certain level, even at higher levels, man, like every other vocal you're going to listen to is probably going to have been tracked on an SM7B. So it is really good for you to know how to manipulate it, how things need to be tracked, and if somebody's self-producing and you're mixing, you can give them recommendations on placement, other things they might need to buy, stuff like that.
Yeah. So my intermediate mics are going to be the Slate mic and then the Warm Audio WA87 and the Warm Audio WA47. No, we'll get 251.
Ooh. Yeah.
So Warm Audio makes clones, but they actually make really good clones. And the reason why they're really good is because they have the same characteristics as the mic that they're cloning, but then they also aren't more than $1,000. W87 is a clone of the mic that I'm going to be getting. It's $600. They just did a redesign of it. I honestly really liked the first version of it too. It could sound a little cheap in the top end. It's okay. I grew up on cheap gear. I know how to get rid of S sounds.
Yep.
Slate mic, we talked about that a whole bunch. And then the 251 clone. 251s are very good for female vocals and for pop music in general. I heard their clone. I was actually pretty stoked on it.
So my options, let's see. My options would probably be the Slate mic. Obviously, we've sung its praises. I definitely think that is one of the best. That is the best mic for the money until you start getting up to crazy high numbers. And even then, it is the most flexible mic, bar none. My other mic in that price range, the intermediate whatever price range, or is a Neumann Tlm-103. I am very partial to this mic because I have used it a lot and I know how it sounds. So an extra thing, I work at one of the studios that I work out of, I get hired to engineer out of, is a vocal studio in Durham, North Carolina, but they primarily do a cappella music. So like raw vocals are their thing. They use a lot of Tlm-103s in that studio.
That's interesting to me.
And they
really
use
is because
the vintage 80s, the vintage
I feel
87.
I feel like that mic is really good without it being processed. So that's why it sounds so good for Billie Eilish, and that would make sense for acapella. But
exactly.
once that mic gets compressed, it could be a little tough.
So it can be, but I really do like it. I think it's because it sounds good just with nothing on it. Like it just sounds good.
Yeah, like it's easier to get there.
Exactly. I can get there faster. And another really interesting thing about it, if you are into acapella music and it's something that you want to do, Tlm-103 is amazing for beatboxing.
Really?
There's so much low-end information. It takes the the kick drums that you do with your mouth really well.
That's interesting.
It's got a good bit of like that low mid 150.
I am filming a podcast, mother. Wow. Man, this is what I get for being in between places to live right now. I'm like my mom turned my old, this is the room where I grew up learning music, and she turned it into her dressing room.
Nice.
It's okay. You're fine. That's staying in. That whole thing is staying in.
Let's go.
I can't wait to show everybody the new stew.
I know, right? I'm really stoked for it, dude. But yeah, Tlm-103 is mine. It is surprisingly versatile. It sounds really good on guys and girls. It works really well for any kind of hi-fi music. So it doesn't work great for indie music unless it's indie pop. But any kind of pop music or any kind of very high fidelity music, it works really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, those would be mine. Slate mic and a Neumann Tlm-103.
Cool. And then I think kind of where we're at right now, I would say I would go with, because this is kind of where I'm at right now. I don't want a 47 and I also don't want a 251.
Yeah.
But if I was looking for a 47 or a 251, I would get one of the Golden Age clones, because side by side, they are the only clone that I've heard that sounds like the Telefunken, and they're $1,700, $1,800, which is crazy. Those are the only mics that I could really think of. The other ones would be, a U87 Ref C. That's it.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So for me, I would say, from what I've used.
Chandler TG microphone.
Yeah, that one.
That's
the
only other one. That's also 1,800 or something like that.
Yeah, I've never used that one. I am probably gonna say there's a couple Soyuz microphones that I'm interested in that I've used before.
Those things are neat.
They're pretty cool. They also have a very specific sound, so that's the only thing that's kind of keeping me away from them.
Oh yeah.
The U87 is so classic. It's hard for me to justify not putting that on a list for me. I'm also a sucker for a Neumann. I've also used a U87 a lot. So I know I've used the AI and the vintage. So yeah. I know both well.
Yeah. The only other thing that I'm genuinely considering, I pretty much made up my mind on the U87. The one clone I heard, I didn't really like. Mm-hmm. The only other microphone I'm actually considering is the Chandler TG microphone, because it has voicings like the 47, 87, and then the FET 47. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I don't want a 47 at all, but it could have the same functionality as the Slate mic. Well, hey, it might save me some time, and it only gets 5-star reviews everywhere. So I think I'm going to order one, try it out, and then if I hate it, I'll send it back. And
yeah, that's the other positive. You can always buy one, try it out, send it back, get your money back.
Yeah, or I'll just order both of them and do a shootout.
And then send one back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's a good move. I think so. I'm trying to think of all the mics that I used. I was a sucker for I'm trying to make sure. The 67.
Oh yeah.
The U67.
Dude, that microphone is so cool.
It is
so cool. And
it is,
to be honest
very
with you,
cool.
if I was making buku bucks, I would order a 67 instead.
Yeah, I am. It's one of those that I'm like, I really like a lot. It is also expensive.
Yeah, there's $7,000 for a new one.
Yeah, I know. But that's one of those things where it's like, I would buy it and then I would probably never need another microphone ever.
And what's interesting about this 67, it's very much in between. So if you're in that price range where you can afford to blow that kind of money, then that's a great mic.
And
because it's in between a 47 and an 87.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect.
It's gonna do a lot.
Yeah, you could do a lot with that microphone.
Yeah, that's kind of why I'm thinking I might need it. But also, I have to think about like my client base and who I'm working with. For some reason, well, I know why. I end up tracking a lot of girl vocalists because I'm in a band with a girl vocalist. So that's kind of part of it. So I'm trying to figure out like where that sweet spot is going to be for me. I also need to figure out what works well with her voice. I know an 87 works well with her voice, so that's why I'm leaning towards that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some others. But I think if I was going to go big money, I'd get a 67.
Yeah, they're cool mics. I mean, I don't know. I still think like in a perfect world, I would just have an 87 and a Ref C, and that's it, because I don't see myself doing anything that I would really need a 47, but if I needed one, I would just get a clone that sounds close enough.
Yeah.
And that's best case scenario, like your boys winning Grammys.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
I still wouldn't have anything crazy because the honest truth is I don't need anything crazy.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, a potential would be a reference C for me, but I'm not sure because I've not used it extensively. I've used it once on one guy who had a lower voice, so it didn't really work on that mic. So I would have to try it out a couple different times. But
Yeah.
One other thing, talking about all these microphones, it's all kind of like here or there. We're getting into nuance of we are looking for a specific thing, and we're trying to make good music faster. We're
Right.
trying to get to the end product a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
And that's where the spending the more money on the more microphones kind of comes in.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, shout out to the 6-figure Home Studio. They're part of the reason why we're even here right now.
Mm-hmm.
But they never really talked about gear because they were all about, it's not about the gear. Gear won't build your business, which they're absolutely correct on.
Very true.
But I feel like there's not enough resources really guiding people towards the right gear. Because if it wasn't for that advice that I was just given by Matt Rad and Matt Beckley, then I probably would have went through a dozen different microphones, Yeah. Because in my head, it's not, it's always looking for that compromise. And sometimes it's not about compromise. Sometimes it's about getting what you actually want,
Mm-hmm.
Get the microphone that you want, but then don't get those $4,000 speakers, dude.
Exactly.
Are you mixing? No.
Yeah. Then it doesn't.
Benny
yeah,
Blanco
you don't need
still has rockets.
Yeah. There you go.
But here's the deal.
Actually.
Benny Blanco has a reference C and a Chandler TG preamp running into a UA 1176, but he has $250 monitors because he doesn't mix and he knows how they sound.
Yeah. There you go. And I think that's the key is when you make purchases, making purchases that that are going to go further. And if you need to spend the money, don't get the thing that sounds like the thing that you want. Just go get the thing that you want if you can afford it.
Yeah. Or even worse, the thing that is almost as expensive as the thing that you want, but doesn't sound like the thing that you want.
Yeah, exactly.
It just looks like it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. Like go get the exact thing that you want.
And that's a huge selling point on microphone clones is, hey, it looks like it and it kind of sounds like it. But then you put them in a mix side by side and the other one sounds like it has a Chinese capsule in it,
Yeah, exactly. This is the other thing that Josh learned. Do your research.
Do your research, because I started out thinking that I wanted an 87, but there had to be a compromise. And I almost fell for 2 different compromises until I got my hands on dry stems of them, and I realized these aren't anything like what I want.
Yep. So, on that note, I think it's been a good conversation, man. We've been going for a hot minute.
I have to go co-write.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know you gotta go right.
I'm gonna go do
I think
that.
I think it's been a good little
dude.
Nice,
I need to
dude.
stop with the carbonation while we're doing
bro.
podcasts.
I know, dude.
Can you bleep all my burps out so
No.
it sounds like I'm saying bad things?
Raw and uncut, man.
Dang, dude. Can't do that to me.
I think we had a good little conversation about microphones, learned a couple things. If you guys have any questions, hit us up. We're always down to talk you through, choice options.
Yeah.
What it comes down to
if you don't have the patience, TLDR, buy what you want unless if you're doing it so people think you're cool. That's what the whole entire hour-long conversation was about. That was the point.
Buy what's going to be best for you. Don't go overboard, for sure. Don't go overboard.
Don't go overboard.
And buy what's going to help you make music the better.
Next podcast is going to be Josh actually bought a Telefunken U47. Here's the story of how I bought a $10,000 microphone.
Yeah. Buy the thing that's going to help you make music better.
Exactly.
On that note, we're out. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
And that's it for this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please check us out on your favorite podcasting platform. Leave a review. It helps the show so much. Kind of get out there for new people to find. If you want to watch this, if you aren't already, check us out on YouTube by searching Home Studio Hangout. And thank you so much again for giving us your time and your attention. And remember, keep on creating.